2. Hello, everyone. So excited. Y'all know that I just get over the moon when we get to have Dr. Tom Necela on our webinar series. One, because he's just absolutely amazing. Number 2, he really is like the expert on this whole planning for your exit strategy. You know, when you're getting into practice and you're building a business, you got to think about what's going to happen when you get out of business. And these webinars with him are the most requested that we get every single year, which is why we try to bring them back to you twice a year. Now, if you are new to the webinar series or do not know who Dr. Tom is, let me just tell you a little bit about him. He was one of the first chiropractors to ever get his certified professional medical auditor status, and I will tell you that is a really hard certification to get. He has a background as a former insurance claims analyst, has certifications as a professional coder, professional compliance officer, and this really does give him a very unique perspective on some of the challenges that you face as a doctor in practice today. He's also absolutely hilarious, very down to earth, and has the most amazing blog ever out there on chiropractic. If you are not following Strategic DC, checking it out, reading it on a regular basis, you are totally missing out. 1, his topics are spot on. Number 2, did I mention he was super funny? And he talks about all of the things that are really impacting practices today, not about things that are completely irrelevant to what's going on in your office, but real life stuff, how to address them. He does some consulting. He's the man, bottom line. So I'm just going to turn it over to him because we just want to hear from him. Dr. Tom, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks so much, Christy, and thanks for all of you for being with us today. And this topic we're talking about is how to utilize an associate as part of your exit strategy. And as Christy had mentioned, at the Strategic Chiropractor, we do a couple different things, all under the banner of what we call working smarter. Business strategy, that kind of stuff. But today, we're going to talk about the other side of the fence, which is what happens when you say to us, how do we get out? And specifically, I want to talk about how you can use an associate as part of your exit strategy, not necessarily just to grow your practice, but really as the person that you're eventually going to transition or sell your practice to. So that's what we're going to be talking about, but I'd love to know from all of you where you're at in this one very important question, because it's going to define how you look at an associate. And I just want to ask a question. How many of you have been part of a bad associateship? Now, we can kind of say from either side of the fence as an employee, an owner, or both. So just use that questions box there, and I'd love for you to answer yes, as employee, owner, both. And I guess if you've never been part of a bad associateship, then great, right? No. But I'd love to see where you are all at in terms of maybe your thought process of being an associate, because this is a little different when you're talking about your exit strategy. So again, just type in the questions panel whether you've been part of a bad associateship as an employee, owner, both, or if you're privileged enough to say neither, then go ahead and type that in. Just want to see where people are at. And by the way, we'll keep all of you anonymous, so I'll just kind of shout out some answers with first names so you don't have to feel like I'm turning you in if you're the bad employee, bad employer, or whatever it might be. But let's just see where we're at. So let's see. Dr. Sean says yes as employee. Dr. Sandra says no and have 2 great associates. That's awesome. Stefan says no, both, says Dan. Ken is employee. Nick is no. Michelle is neither. Yes, Robert as an owner. Dawn as both. Malcolm, yes. owner, Todd, neither. Robert, Jason, neither. Hey, this is awesome. So really, I actually can see people on all the options coming through. So this is going to be super fun because basically what this tells me is we've got a balanced audience. Yeah, some of you have had a bad associateship as the employee. Some of you have been the owner and hired a bad associate. Some of you have been both, and some have literally had neither of those scenarios happen. So this is awesome. So let's kind of dive in and talk about our topic today, which again is how to utilize an associate as part of your exit strategy. And again, we're going to be very specific here in having the associate be the person that you're going to transition or sell your practice to. Now, with that, as some of you just saw in terms of participation, there are basically three realities that we're going to have to get on the table right from the start so that we know what we're up against. And the first reality is bad associateships are common. Okay, so yes, a bunch of you did say, yeah, well, you've been part of a bad associateship on the owner side and on the employee side, and some of you both. Yes, that is common, and just like, unfortunately, in our society today, divorce is common. It doesn't mean, though, that you don't get married. If you love the person you're with, you know that the divorce is possible. It just doesn't mean that, hey, I'm just giving up on marriage altogether. And I think of the associate exit strategy route in the same way. Yes, just because some of you or some people you know had a bad associateship doesn't mean that it has to be that way, right? So the second reality is late stage recovery is rare. So yes, I have actually never met this couple, this Superman couple, who tries to sell their practice to an associate or it doesn't work out and they come rocketing out of retirement, 82 years old to save the day, right? So really, we can't afford for an associateship, for most of you, to go badly at the late stages in your career. And I don't know where you're at in terms of that, but it's definitely the kind of thing you want to do right, especially as you have fewer years in chiropractic to go. And that may be the reality, number three, that some of you need to be facing is your time may be running out. So, for example, if you say, hey, I'm only a couple, 3 years away from exiting and you don't have an associate yet, well, then you might have to start if they're going to be part of your exit strategy plan, or you might have to start speaking to the associate that you do have if you're in the home stretch. So those are the three realities we're going to face when we look at this topic of how to use an associate as a part of our exit strategy. Now, kind of some bad news. These are, realities for a lot of people, but none of it good. Is that, number one, a bad associateship feels really compromising. The proctology exam feels a little invasive, feels like somebody got in your personal space and you paid to have it happen. That's kind of like a bad associateship. They got in your business, they learned some of the secrets of your trade, they saw everything that you've got, and you paid them to do so, and then they leave. So that's bad news number one that we've obviously got to be aware of. Bad news number two is then because you've paid them, it could be quite costly. And in fact, if you don't do it right, they can take some of your practice with you. It can be even more costly. And then the bad associateship reality number three is it can be even contentious. So similar to a divorce, some of the associate breakups are kind of ugly, kind of messy, kind of bad. Or it could even be contentious and you say, hey, I want to offer you the sale of my practice. And they go, no, I don't want it. And you were banking on that as your exit strategy. So we've got to keep that bad news in mind. But I've got good news for you that there is good news. So some of you look at the reality, some of you look at the bad news and say, no way am I going to do this because no way is it going to happen. Well, good news number one is successful associate transitions are possible. And even if you've got some sort of bad chiropractic taste in your mouth, look at your dentist, look at your medical doctor, look at attorneys. Basically, all of them, their dominant method of transition is through an associate or partner. Okay, well, first of all, I mean, it's hard to even find like the solo MD or even a solo dentist or solo attorney these days. And you say, well, but they don't all just, retire and die with their boots on. And so part of their strategy is, yes, they are bringing in the younger doctor, the partner attorney, the young associate, and they are transitioning out that way. So if it were just a kind of a flawed idea all around, you wouldn't see other professions even doing it. And yet, as I just stated, that's the dominant mode of transition in other professions. So that leads us to believe that maybe we're just doing something a little wrong in chiropractic, but transitions are definitely possible. The second thing that we need to understand is associate transitions are definitely profitable. So again, that's why some of these other professions do it, because yes, it is profitable for them. It's even profitable for the associate. And you can just look at the basic math and say, hey, if I were able to have somebody in my business that made me some money and I was able to sell them the practice, then I'm kind of getting two income streams, one from the associate revenue, second from the sale of the practice. Well, 1 + 1 = 2. If you sell your practice, that's only one income stream. So yeah, it can be definitely more profitable than the standard route. And the other thing that we have to realize is a smarter route is available. And that's part of what we are here for today. And that's a big part of what we do at Strategic Chiropractor in our transitions division is say, hey, you know what? You don't want to fail like everyone else. You don't want an associateship to end badly like you've heard before or been a part of. So let's take the smarter route and let's make this thing happen for you. Now, there is one catch with all that. And you go, okay, so if it's so easy, why isn't everybody doing it? Well, the catch is sort of, the famous Einstein quote is insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So in many ways, you have to avoid the common chiropractic mistakes. You have to avoid essentially the bad moves that your colleagues have done, or maybe the bad moves that you've done in the past. And you have to say, yeah, if I'm going to succeed, I've got to avoid all these things. And so that's really the big part of what I want to focus on with you all today here on this webinar is talking about 7 strategies. And these strategies could be looked at from, 2 angles. One is the 7 strategies you need to have an associate successfully be part of your transition plan, or the 7 mistakes you need to avoid because those are things that are going to kill that plan. Okay, so let's talk about that. And believe it or not, the very first hurdle many chiropractors unfortunately have a ton of trouble with is just getting out of the starting gate. I kind of look at this picture, I go, look at this jockey over here all the way on the left, and look at where his horse is going. It is going to crash into that horse. So neither one of those guys are going to win the race because they got out of the starting gate badly. And if you're going to succeed in your exit plan, get to this finish line that you want to get to, then you must get out and start that process properly. Okay, and so in that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rule and some recommendations. So the rule is start with the end in mind. If your goal is to exit or transition, then my recommendations would be avoid any associate whose goal is just to learn the business. I mean, if they say that to you, you go, well, my goal is getting out. Their goal is learning. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to learn and they'll leave. Similarly, avoid chiropractors who are just looking to rent space because you have no control over them or any leverage. Probably you've not signed a non-compete because they just want to rent space. They want to bring their practice inside your practice. Maybe you make a little bit of income now, but you'll never sell the business to these people. Now, I can say never, and I can say, yeah, some of these are generalizations, but yeah, again, if you want to get out of the starting gate, the best way to do it is run straight. And these are ways that your horse is running crooked. The third thing that I want to tell people to avoid in terms of recommendation, avoid people who mention money problems from the start. I was on the phone with a client recently, and they said, I really like this young doc that I interviewed, and I just wonder, if they're going to be able to make it. Though they were talking about, they've got $2,000 dollars a month of student loans from the chiropractic loan. They have loans from undergrad. They declared bankruptcy a couple of years ago, and they really just need to make 6 figures now to be able to support their lifestyle. So what has this person told you? Like, man, I've got a ton of money problems right from the start. and you need to pay me at least $100,000 a year to make this thing work. And I said, well, okay, well, just run the math here. How's this person going to buy? Again, start with the end in mind. So that's rule number one, and that will eliminate some of your candidates right there. If you cannot vision, or they cannot envision a way that they get to purchase this thing, then don't hire them as an associate, because they're not going to get you to your end goal. Okay, so then let's go to number two, which is establish the purchase or transition time frame. So on this one, I'm going to point the finger at a lot of you, because a lot of you will take an associate, you'll interview an associate, or you'll even advertise your practice as a potential sale, and your time frame is kind of like, well, someday when I want to slow down, or when the timing's right, or when I think you're ready. That's not a time frame. Okay, and you're not going to attract a serious buyer with that type of time frame, because you haven't given them a concrete time frame that they can plan their life around. Okay, so in terms of establishing a purchase or transition time frame, the rule really here is that you have to hire a DC that wants to own in your time frame, which the prerequisite is that means you know what your time frame is. And just like I just warned you to not give them a someday time frame, I'm going to warn you to be aware of their someday time frame. Like, I would like to purchase someday. Well, yeah, somebody might say, well, I'd like to be a millionaire someday. No. Well, how's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? How are you going to structure this? That's what you need to know. So hire a DC that has some sort of clear idea, as well as deliver your own clear idea. So now, some recommendations along with that is the ideal time frame, if you want to hit a sweet spot in the market, is probably 1 to 2 years. And here's why. Most able associates don't want to wait 5 years to own. Now, remember, the title of this training is How to Use an Associate as an Exit Strategy, right? So I'm not saying you can't hire an associate who doesn't want to own for 5 years or more away. Just don't consider them part of your exit strategy. I mean, if you've got 5 to 10 years before you want to get out, fine. Hire an associate. Have them help you grow the practice. Make some money off them. That's wonderful, okay? But if you're in the end stretch here, the home stretch of where you say, I want to be out in anywhere from the next, year, 2, 3, maybe, then hiring an associate who doesn't want to own for 5 years or more is not going to work, right? Consider also that they might, if they've never worked with you, they might be a little freaked out by the process if they say, well, what if this doesn't work out? So what we usually recommend is what we call a non-binding back-out period. So if you're hiring somebody you've never absolutely worked with and saying, I want you to buy my practice, it's very real that they might not want to sign an agreement to buy your practice before they've even worked together. But yet, you don't want to determine 3 years down the line, when you want to be out in 3 years, are you going to buy this thing or not? We've been working together the last 3 years. No. Create a non-binding back-out period where, hey, for the first 90 days, maybe up to 6 months, we can kind of feel each other out, make sure we're a good fit, and then we're going to enter this contractual phase where, we're talking about the sale of my practice. So that way they're willing to say, okay, let's make sure I'm not, jumping in too soon, but yet you don't go to the other extreme of not having a commitment, okay? So number 3 then would be set the price of the practice prior to the purchase. Now, there is some flexibility here, but I've got some real good reasons and rationale why this helps make many of these deals work, where many that don't have a price set will fail. So the rule here is literally to set the price of your practice prior to their purchase, or to at least agree on the formula for how the future price will be determined. Okay, so some of you say, well, I don't know. Well, hey, you've either got to set the price now, or you've got to tell them how the price will be calculated then. That's it. Anything less than that is way too muddy for them to commit to. And again, think about this. You're asking somebody to commit in terms of a contract. You're asking somebody to commit mentally. You're asking somebody to commit perhaps even in terms of money, but you haven't given them a target. You haven't given them a firm answer, so you're not going to get them to commit to that unless they're desperate, and you don't want those people. Okay? If they're so desperate for a job, they're willing to say yes to anything. Well, first, they might not even be committal, and second is they're probably not going to make it. So again, set the price of the practice or agree on the formula, and then here's your rationale. It gives both you, the seller, and the buyer a tangible target to shoot for. Okay, you say, hey, this is the price of the practice. Now, I know your next question is probably going to be, well, what happens if the practice grows? Well, guess what? If the practice grows, it's instant equity for the associate or the buyer. They love that. In other words, hey, we're going to set this practice price now. You helped me grow this thing. You basically bought your way into a bargain because it's literally worth more then than it was worth more now. And you go, Tom, well, that sounds like a good deal for them, but doesn't sound like a good deal for me. Well, actually, if the practice grows, you're going to profit along the way because remember, they're your associate. You're not giving them 100% of your profits or anything like that, so you got to structure an employment or a compensation arrangement so you actually make some money off these people. But really, you should not fear setting the price of the practice now. Okay? So that's number 3. Number 4 then would be to set clear patient expectations to avoid explosions. And I've got to say that this is one of the biggest explosions that will ruin an associateship. It's talking about patient expectations. What do I really mean by that? Well, who is going to handle the new patients? Who's going to handle the existing patients? What are my expectations for you building your own practice versus, working within my practice, me helping you? All of that is what I mean by patient expectations. And this is where I would have to say, if I had to pick the number one thing where most associates have failed, it's right here. You guys can agree just fine on the money, but this is what's going to actually provide the income on both sides of the fence for longer, the patient expectations. So the rule here is get the agreement on patient expectations. Don't even hire them. If you are not both on the same page in terms of expectations, do not hire them. Because they might take your job and then they'll quit because they say, well, I was really hoping you would just hand me all the patients. But I didn't tell you that, well, you weren't clear enough, So let's talk about some rationale here. Really, many associates expect you to have the patients for them and them to do no marketing. And I know that some of you are probably laughing at this right now. That's ridiculous. Why would I do that? Well, I said it's an expectation of theirs. I didn't say it was right or, profitable or anything like that, or even workable, right? Second thing is you would love them to build their own practice without touching your patients except when you go on vacation, and then you want them all back afterward. And I know that some of you, if you're really honest, you'll say, yep, that's me. That is. Okay, so what do we have here? Well, we have what I call an expectations mismatch. They expect you to hand them everything and pave the way for them, and you expect for them to touch nothing and just make you profits, right? So you need to be really clear on the expectations and even what I call the practice model you will use. So let's dive into this. It's not really a sidetrack. It's really more a deeper level of what this patient expectations look like inside a chiropractic associate model. Because there's a few dominant models out there, and you need to make sure that your associate is on the same page with the model that you're going to use, okay? So the first is what I call the shared superstar, okay? And here you're basically going to look at someone who says, hey, I'm going to share some of the patients, new patients, share some of the existing patients with you, and you're going to get some of your own. The next one is what I call the independent income producer, okay? And this is the associate who expects you to have the patients for them. They do no marketing whatsoever, okay? And then there we go. Sorry, we messed up on the slide there. Okay, so first, let's just erase that last 30 seconds. Let's go to independent income producer first, okay? Because this is the one you all love, okay? And really, it's the associate building their own practice inside yours. You have little new patient sharing, no existing patient sharing. Your staff is shared, of course. The associate pays either a rent or a percentage of your income. Here's the good news. This is least expensive. It's also least invasive. Pretty easy to get running. But here's the bad news. This is least likely to lead to a long-term purchase because they might not generate any money. You're just like, hey, I give you a little place to practice. Have at it. Build your own practice. The other thing is, if they build their own practice, they may not feel the need to purchase yours, right? They just leave, okay? So then we have the shared superstar. This is, they build the practice with some of your overflow. You've got some new patient sharing, some existing patient sharing, okay? Staff is shared. They're paid a salary or a percentage of income. There's more potential for profit, especially with a good associate. And there's a good structure in place, at least for a future purchase, because you're sharing, but you're not giving them everything, right? Might not generate enough money is obviously one con. And then you have to have their income sufficient enough for them to purchase, and you have to have enough income to make it work. Then the third model is what I call the overflow optimizer. This is for those of you who have an abundance of patients. In other words, you might even not be taking new patients. You can't handle all the patients. So this is what I call free new patient sharing. Like you're literally going to hand them just about as many new patients as they can handle. Freely share your existing patients. You're going to share your staff. You're going to pay them. And the pros is this is very attractive to the associate because this is the scenario where, hey, you don't have to come in and market. Just come on in and adjust, right? It's also a good structure, though, for a future purchase because they know they would be purchasing a practice that is really humming. I mean, really doing well and have enough overflow that it can give them a living. And so in their mind, this builds the desire for them to purchase it because they say, hey, when the old man or the old lady is out of here, all that income's coming to me. Okay. Now, the cons is you need a lot of patients and great systems to do this. And the other interesting con that many of you don't realize is you could also get a very dependent associate who, you feed them all the time, but they never really become entrepreneurial. Okay. So those are the three models. And like I said, you need to be very clear which model you are hiring somebody for. Now, like I said, 2 out of the 3 are really good for future purchase. But you need to be very clear on which one you're going to run in the employment side, and then definitely need to know how that's going to lead you to a purchase in the end. Okay? So now let's go to strategy number 5 that we want to employ, or the mistakes that we want to avoid. And this is the big question that I get a lot of. And it's how much do we pay these guys? What do we set as our salary? And my solution is very simple. Set their salary so that they can hit your target. So in other words, the rule becomes literally that their compensation arrangement must give the ability for them to save for the purchase. So you can't pay them so little that they barely get by and they'll never be able to save to get the money down. And you say, well, then I may finance them. So basically then you're paying them along the way and you're financing them to the goal. But again, if they don't have any extra money, there's not a lot of room for anything to go wrong. What I would rather you do is pay them enough that they can make a good living, that they make you profit, they can save some money, and they can go to the bank and get a loan. And then the bank cashes you out, and you're not at risk for all of that. Okay? So let's talk about then recommendations of how you do this. Well, first is how not to do it. So many of you say, well, I'm just going to give them a bare minimum, and, they're going to have to, what I call bank on the bonus to eat. Bare minimum is, they probably won't even be able to eat on this salary. It just gives them a little something, and then, they're going to have to really work to make sure that they, stay afloat. Well, you need to actually pay them enough that they can stay afloat, and if you're going to bonus them, that should accelerate your sale. So in other words, any more that they make on top of that should just make them have the ability to purchase your practice sooner, quicker, easier. Okay. The second recommendation would be, yes, you want to consider their loans and their debt, but don't go too far in the other direction. I've had docs come to me and say, hey, I've got this associate. I think he would be a great fit. He's a boatload in debt. He's got alimony payments from his divorce. He's got this. He's got all this. And so, he needs a minimum of $12,000 a month. And I literally had this scenario a few months ago. $12,000 a month. I go, whoa, how much are you producing? How much did you pay your last associate? He's like, oh, half. But this guy seems really good. Well, that's a big stretch, in terms of overcompensating, I think. Two magic numbers to give you some perspective would be, one is to at least match what they're making right now. So again, you have to imagine, why are these people even leaving their job, or why are they looking for a job with you? Well, they want to at least make the same pay or better. And then if you can show them how they can make $100,000, that seems to be a magic number here in chiropractic. Literally, they want to be able to say to their family, their friends, and even to a banker in the future, I'm able to make $100,000. Now, that doesn't mean you have to give them $100,000 salary, okay? But you basically, if you can show the ropes of here's how we can do this. I'm going to pay you this much per month. If we grow the practice just by this, then your salary or your bonus will enable you to get to $100,000. Okay, that's what we call a magic number. If you can show them how to do that, then it'll be a very interesting and attractive associate opportunity for them. Okay, so then let's also figure out this one part of the associate process that some of you like and some of you don't. And quite frankly, if you don't like the idea of mentoring them, then maybe the associate route isn't for you, and you might be better off with either what we call a sell and switch or a traditional sale. We'll talk about that in a minute. But part of getting the associate to hit their targets, to be profitable, to be a good future purchaser, is that you have to mentor them, and not only clinically, because all of you realize that, and some of you don't even want to do that, so your associate is definitely not for you, but you also need to mentor their priorities, and this they don't understand, particularly with some of the millennials who want everything now, okay? Mentor their priorities in terms of, as soon as they get some money, they want to go spend it. So you have to say, hey, look, your priority should be to purchase this practice first. Like, once you get some money, put it into the practice purchase, not the house, not paying off your student loans, not getting a fancy car, not whatever. And here's why. You need to teach them there's a difference between buying a house. Yes, we all want a house someday, buying a nice car, whatever, paying off your loans, or purchasing an income-producing business. See, the house is nice, but it's not going to produce income for them like your business will. So once they get some money, there's some mentoring that needs to happen there. And I'm recalling a conversation that I had between a dad and his son. And he was paying his son real good money. I mean, his son was making $120,000 or $140,000 a year. But dad failed to mentor his son in the area's priority. And so when dad wanted to finally settle up and retire and sell the business to the son didn't have a dime. He just spent everything, even though he was making good income. So this is part of the salary talk with them, is what they will do with their money. And as your associate begins to make more and more money, realize your obligation to mentor them in that area. Okay? So let's talk about number 6 then, which I realize, this is a uncomfortable looking slide. And it is uncomfortable for many of you to say no to people, particularly if you like them. And the one area where chiropractors routinely make a mistake of saying, where they should say no and they don't, is what I call the non-compete, non-fit. Okay, now, there are a few of you in a small handful of states where a non-compete essentially doesn't work, okay? But I'm talking a small handful of states. And the other, let's say 45 plus states, a non-compete not only works, it's not only advisable, it's mandatory. And if you're in one of those states, which is most, you have to be able to say no to any associate that you're going to hire that's not willing to sign a non-compete. So the rule is basically, if your goal is a future sale, the non-compete is necessary. Again, the exceptions are if you're in a state like, say, for example, Alabama, that says they will not permit a non-compete for physicians, for chiropractors, then you don't have a choice, right? The vast majority of the rest of you, non-compete is absolutely necessary, and do not hire an associate who won't sign a non-compete, and I'll even go one step further, is what we call a non-solicitation. So non-compete says, no, you can't open up business across the street and, take my patients, compete against me. Non-solicitation is, and you're not going to solicit and take my staff with you. Or solicitation can also be interpreted in some states to say, yeah, you went across the street and then you marketed to my patient list somehow the entire time, even though they were technically not your patients. So make sure they sign that. Okay, now the rationale here is also that you should not hire an associate before they sign a non-compete. So some of you will say, well, what if we don't know if we're going to do the buy and they just want to work for me for a little while? Well, it's too late later, so sign it now. Okay? So the reasoning, if you need to tell them why, is really the non-compete will protect both of your future plans. I mean, if you tell them really the reason that they're being hired here is that you want them to be part of your exit strategy, as part of your transition plan, as the future purchaser of your business. And guess what? The non-compete is protecting you, yes, from them going up and opening across the street, but it's also protecting them. Because guess what? They don't want you to sell them the business and open up across the street yourself. So it's good for both of you. The non-compete also will preserve your value. And this is what many chiropractors don't realize. If you have an associate working in your practice, let's say they're doing 40% of the load, they're 40% of your collections, and you don't even have a non-compete on them, the bank looks at it like this. You don't have a non-compete, 40% of your practice could walk out that door the minute you put the practice on the sale, on the market. So really the bank says, so I know that you say that your practice is worth this, but it's really worth X minus this, and that minus could be up to 40% lower, because they go, you don't even have anything to protect the fact that your associate can walk out with, 40% of the practice or a percentage of the practice. So it really helps to preserve the value. And the other thing that I look at it is, kind of going all the way back to start with the end in mind. Your goal, again, is a future sale. And so if they won't sign a non-compete, in many ways, it says to me, they plan to leave. They don't plan to buy. And so if they plan to leave, you can't plan to sell it to them. It's as simple as that. Move on, next person. That's it. And again, there are a few exceptions for those of you who are in state where a non-compete just won't work. But for the rest of you, hey, that's not your buyer. And then let me share the hard advice of strategy number 7. Some of you are way too nice. And the reason your associateship fails or your associate transition fails to getting them to purchase your practice is you're bottle feeding them. You're treating them like a big baby. And your job here is to cultivate the buyer, not a bottle feeder. Okay, so here's what I mean by this. The rule really is that the mediocre associate that you baby is your biggest risk. You go, what do we mean by that? Well, here's the deal. Most of you will fire a bad associate. And I'm going to define a bad associate in terms of a transition as somebody that doesn't have the skills, they can't take care of your patients. They don't have any money to purchase, or they don't have any desire to purchase. Of course, that's a bad associate. They're never going to purchase, right? And even if they did purchase, somehow you might not want to purchase because they don't have the skills. And a great associate is obviously has decent enough skills that they don't chase your patients away. They have at least a little money or enough money they can probably make this thing happen, and they definitely have a desire. So you go, okay, got it. So who's the bottle feeder? Who's the baby? Who's the danger? Is the mediocre one. And the mediocre associate is somebody that's nice but not very committal. In other words, they don't say to you, yes, I want to buy this thing, or yes, I think that buying within a year is a great plan, or yes, I have the money to purchase because I've saved up this, or whatever. That's the non-committal. The other kind of mediocre associate is somebody who's really nice and they may be attracted to your situation, but they're anxious enough that they can't see themselves buying. So instead of babying this person that's a mediocre associate, you have to get them to grow up and basically, get on one side of the fence. So in other words, get them off the fence or get them out of your plan. Because at this point, if it were a bad associate, you would have fired him. If it were a great associate, you're already moving on the plan. The mediocre associates try and ride the fence. And I've seen people ride the fence for years and years and years with a mediocre associate who really... at the end, they fall off the side of the fence and they say, I don't want to buy. And they wasted 5 years with an associate. Okay. Get them off the fence or get them out of your plan, So if they're a little hesitant, then say, hey, I'll sell you the practice and stay on and work as your associate. We call that the sell and switch. So in other words, if they're just anxious about patient management, if they're anxious that if you leave, the patient leaves, we have a solution for that. It's called the sell and switch. You sell them the practice. You literally get them to buy your practice. You get the money up front for the practice, and then you agree to work for them, with them for a defined time period to help them with the transition, to help minimize patient attrition, to help them with management, whatever it is that they're anxious about. See, and if you offer them that and they're still non-committal or they're still anxious, then you just might not have a buyer, Or you can say, hey, well, what about if I just do some short-term transition consulting with you? In other words, you can call me, we'll meet, we'll create a consulting contract. You're going to pay me for this, but you're going to buy this practice, and if you're worried about it, that you need just more help, then let me consult with you for 3 to 6 months. Now, I will tell you, most people will prefer the sell and switch because you're actually there, you're with the patients. But some of you say, you know what, I'm going to be off in the Cayman Islands somewhere. I'm not going to stick around and adjust patients for this guy. Well, offer them some transition consulting then. Okay? And who better to be a consultant than in their own practice is the former owner, right? Or just if some of you have to get even a little more creative than that, then say, you know what, maybe you'll do some practice management consulting with them and you'll take either a fixed fee or maybe just a bonus of how much they grow the practice. In other words, the idea here is not so much of which specific plan is going to work, but the fact that you've got to get them off the fence and get them into a plan. And so there are a few options that basically can say, yeah, I know you're anxious. I know but what about this? What about this? What about this? And if they keep saying no to all of this, then maybe it is time that you just got to move on, right? But know that there are options here. So with that, I want to turn the camera back to you, and I want you to look hard in the mirror at yourself. I love this quote from a coach of mine called Dan Sullivan. He says, all progress starts with the truth. And in this, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions, knowing what you know now. I mean, we've only been together a little short time here today, but knowing what you know now about the associate route and transitions, I want to have you ask yourself 3 questions, okay? And we're going to keep this anonymous, but I want you to play along, type it into the questions panel, because even the act of answering these questions, and I know you're not giving it an hour, thought, a day, a week, a month, or a year, whatever, you're just answering. Okay, so we're going to go through these fast. I want you to answer these questions, type them in to the questions panel quickly so that you can go with this first answer that pops into your head, but also gives you the ability to set some sort of target, some sort of date, some sort of range, some sort of goal for yourself. And that's going to help you get one step closer to hatching your transition plan, whenever that may be and whatever it may look like. Okay? So here's your first question. How soon are you ready to either exit practice, means like sell and hit retirement, or begin to slow down to where you say, I want to bring in an associate for my transition strategy so I can slow down and get out in X number of years? So write a number down. How soon are you ready to exit or slow your practice down toward that transition with an associate? Okay, so months, years, hopefully it's not a decade or more, but if it is, maybe you're a real good planner. Okay, but write that down, type it into the questions panel. How soon are you ready to exit or slow down? Type that in, questions panel. Okay? All right. And again, I'm not going to call out any names or anything like that because I want this to be anonymous for you, but I want you to do it. Okay? How long? Okay, so I'm getting, we've got 5 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 years, 20 years. Okay, there's a real planner. 9 to 12 months, 5 to 7 years, 10 years, 3 to 5, 5 to 10. Okay, 3 years, 4 years. All right, good. So here's what we've got in this range. Okay, some of you are less than 1 year. I hope you have an associate already. If not, you're probably behind. You got to get moving now. If you're in that 0 to 3 year mark, which many of you are, 1, 2, 3 years, again, you need an associate now to have a plan to put in place so that you can not only train, mentor, get that associate up and running, but then you can sell that to that associate. So that 0 to 3 year mark. Okay. Now, for those of you who said 5 years, 10 years, I'm not sure if we even had a 20, but you guys have enough time that you could literally hire the associate for income producing potential. Okay. And you don't have to put them into that sale category just yet because you're also a long ways away. They may be, remember what I said earlier, they might not want to wait 5 or more years. Okay. But that doesn't mean an associate can't be a part of your strategy. It means that you just don't have to hatch that second part of your plan just yet. So that's great. Now let's go to question number 2, which is simply this. Do you have time to learn more? And I want to define that for you, okay? Because if you say, I need to learn more about this, the real question is, yeah, sure, we all need to know more about this, okay? But the key word in this question is, do you have the time to learn more? And let me tell you why. So if you are greater than 5 years away, you have the time to learn more. And here's why. You have enough time to hatch a plan, have it not work, hatch another plan, and then even move toward a sale and have it all happen 2 or 3 times within that 5-year time period or more. Okay? No problem. That's excellent. Okay? So if that's you, then here's what I want to do to help you with that. I want to give you something that we call a transitions checklist. It's basically a kind of a checklist and a scoring test to say, how ready am I to transition my practice and what areas do I need to work on? And then if you want a more detailed version of that, where we literally tell you, show you what it takes to transition a practice, to sell a practice, that's what we call our Ultimate Exit Strategy program. It'll help you learn about all of these things and help you practice prepare. Then I just want you to type in learn if that's you. And again, you should probably be more than 5 years away, and you should probably have enough time, again, that you can hatch this plan and make some changes to your practice right now or get prepared and all that. And if that's you, great. Type learn, and I think that will be a great help to you. Now, the third question that I want is for some of the rest of you. And that is, are you ready to launch your transition plan? And when I say ready to launch, really what I mean is this might be ready to hire an associate. This might be ready to sell. This might be ready to approach your associate who you currently have about purchasing, something like that. So in other words, if you want to sell your practice in the next 0 to 3 years, or you want to launch plans with an existing associate, or you want to even search find an associate to transition to, but your ultimate goal, your time frame is to get out of here in the next 0 to 3 years, and then you're in what we call the launch category. You're in the launch mode, okay? And what I'd love to do for you is to give you a free call where we can talk about your situations. No obligation. We just call it a strategy session or alignment session where we say, hey, let's get you lined up, pointed toward the right goal, give you some pointers in the right direction, or see how we might be able to help you. I want you to type in launch if you're in that category. And again, you should be in this 0 to 3 year mark, and here's why. If you got an associate and you haven't worked out a plan with them, you better before they leave, because your time frame is 0 to 3 years. If you don't have an associate and your time is 0 to 3 years, you better get going on finding one. And if you're looking to say, you know what, forget the associate, I just want to sell, and somewhere in the next 0 to 3 years, then you got to get moving as well. Okay, so the launch call is for any of you guys that are in that scenario, there, any of those scenarios. So with that, though, that's all I have for you right now. But I want to thank you for your time and your attention. But I also want to open it up for questions, because I know that you guys have been great in terms of participation. And that also probably tells me you are the same type of audience that will ask questions if given the opportunity. So I wanted to leave a little time at our end of our presentation. I think we've got a little time according to my clock there. So use the questions panel and fire away at the questions that you may have. The other thing that you can do is, if you're interested in taking us up on either one of those offers, if you're in that learn category, you can go to our website, strategicdc.com/learn, where you can simply download that checklist and get an offer for a discount offer on the Ultimate Exit Strategy program. Or if you're in the launch mode, where you need to get moving with your associate that you currently have, find an associate, or move into a transition or sale mode within the next 0 to 3 years, go to strategicdc.com/launch, and you can download your strategy session right there, schedule that in, and I'd be happy to talk to you about your specific situation. Because I know some of the stuff on the webinar, hey, we're giving advice, strategies that apply to chiropractors in general, but I'd love to be able to talk about your specific situation. And in the meantime, again, I want to open things up for questions. So if you have a question, I do believe that we have a few minutes left. I'd be happy to help answer any questions that you might have. Just use that questions panel. Okay? All right. So let me go over the first question that's sitting here right now, which is, how long should it take before an associate is profitable? Excellent question. And I'm going to give you a very serious answer based on experience with most of you defaulting to the too nice status. Okay? So here's the deal. The way I look at it, the first 0 to 3 months, up to 90 days, you're showing them the ropes. You're getting them trained on your policies, your procedures, how you take care of your patients. You will make zero money off them, and that's okay. If you make any money off them, you've got a winner from the start. Okay? Between 3 and 6 months, the associate should at least be breaking even with you, if not turning a profit corner. Okay, in other words, if not being a little profitable, or at least profitable enough that you know it works. Now, your question was, how long should it be profitable? So yeah, 3 to 6 months. If you hit the 6-month mark and your associate has not made profit, and let's define profit. Profit is not that, hey, they're making some money for the clinic. I'm paying them $5,000 a month, and hey, they collected $4,000 a month. $4,000 this month. No, that's not profitable. You haven't even recovered your costs. Or even if you say, I pay them $5,000 a month, and they made $6,000, that's still not profitable, because you have payroll taxes, you have overhead, you have other things. Okay, so what I'm talking about is you have cleared what you paid them and the overhead or payroll or related expenses. So again, if they can't be profitable at that 6-month mark, okay, I would say they are a very marginal candidate. Now, I've seen very few candidates who are maybe a little slower to get out of the gate that can get profitable in 6 to 9 months. But I can tell you this, many of you make the mistake of hanging on to an associate for a year and a half, something like that, only to find out that they're no more profitable at 18 months than they were at 6 months. So I would say if you had to draw a hard and fast line, it'd be in that area, that 3 to 6 months with a good solid deadline at 6. Okay? All right. So let's go to Sandra's question. Valuations. Are valuations an important part of the selling process? Yes. And here's why. They're not the first part. Okay, so the first part is literally if you have an associate, getting the right associate, getting them on board with the plan, and then getting them through that first honeymoon, trial, back out period, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so if you just hire an associate and you're just starting with them, or you're looking, you don't have to do evaluation this minute, right? Where they come in handy is once you have that associate in place and or when you're ready to put the practice on the market, whether it's to sell it to the associate through an inside sale offer, or whether it's to say, hey, I want to go another way, and that's where a valuation comes in handy. Okay? All right. Let's go to Dr. Malcolm's associate is a good way to market for an associate. Yes. And this is where probably most chiropractors will have a big challenge in terms of marketing for the associate because it's a big job. Part of what we do at Strategic Chiropractor is help people find associates or help people find people who are trying to buy their practice. And it is literally a full-time job to try to find the right person, the right fit for your practice, everything. So if you're running a busy practice, then what happens is if you're like most chiropractors, you'll throw like an ad up in your state association, maybe at a chiropractic college, and that's about it. And so let's look at it this way. Even an ad in your state association, that means 1 out of 49 states. Every chiropractic association, unfortunately, doesn't have a great percentage of chiropractors in that state as members. So that means, let's say you have half the chiropractors of one state, and then at that point, you're only looking for the people who are actually looking for jobs. That might mean not even half of those, and so you've got like 1/4 of 1/49th or 1/50th of the. You know what that means? The math is like, wow. So essentially, you'll be marketing to 10 people, and then you find out, hey, we don't get an answer. Okay, so you got to go way better than that, way beyond that. And again, that's part of what we do in terms of helping clients. The short answer is market anywhere and everywhere you can. So I think, Christy, that might be all the time that we have for today. Is that correct?
It is. I am so impressed because most people don't finish all of the questions or because they run out of time, or you always end just like right at the perfect spot. So thank you so much, Dr. Tom. Seriously, I really encourage you all, please go to strategicdc.com, check out his blog, take advantage of this incredible offer from him. You will love his blog. Everyone here at our office follows it on a regular basis. And, because frequently we send him questions about different things and ask him questions. He's an incredible resource. Has an incredible staff and team working with him. So really do encourage you, if you're in Virginia, he will be speaking at the end of September 28th through the 30th for their fall convention, I believe is the date. So if you would like the opportunity to hear Dr. Tom speak live and in person, y'all know my feelings. Live and in person is even better than hearing our incredible speakers on a webinar. So I really do encourage you, register for that seminar, attend his live classes. I believe you are talking about this topic, obviously in more detail in Virginia as well, correct, Dr. Tom?
Yes. We are doing I'm doing two presentations. The first is just the opening keynote Saturday morning, which is the state of chiropractic business today. And then we're going to teach for the remainder of the morning and part of the afternoon on transitions. So it's going to be, I think it's like 4-hour transitions class, so way deeper than we went today.
So excellent opportunity to go a little bit more, or well, really not a little bit, a lot more in depth because you get 3 extra hours. And also to hear him as the keynote speaker at the Virginia Chiropractic Association Fall Convention in Norfolk, Virginia. Again, if you have this opportunity, I really do encourage you. Just a reminder, we do not have a webinar next week. I know that all of you are off on Monday. I hope you enjoy it, rest, relax, rejuvenate. And because you'll be jumping right back into practice on Tuesday, want to give you time to spend with your patients and not worry about missing an opportunity for a webinar. But we will pick up the following Tuesday, and we have social media guru Matthew Loop, or Dr. Matthew Loop. He's also a chiropractor. But what he's most famous for is his work in social media. Absolutely incredible. Works with several different charitable organizations with his social media. Recently spoke at Harvard regarding social media. I know that this is a big area of concern as far as compliance goes and promotion and marketing and really being able to educate and reach out to your community. So if you have not registered for this webinar, do so. If you miss it live, you will always be able to have access to the recording afterward, but make sure you or someone from your team or your entire team, whoever's responsible for marketing and things like this, is registered for this webinar. It is a must attend. Again, thank you, Dr. Tom, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here today, and all of you for taking time out of your schedules away from your patients to attend our webinar, and we look forward to seeing you back here in 2 weeks. Have an amazing holiday weekend. Bye-bye, everyone. Dr. Tom?